Vince Gennaro, Sarah Langs, and Mike Petriello. And, I thought for most of these positions that, all right, if you have a bad 2020, we know it was a short season, it was a weird season, I'm willing to forgive it. Vince, at shortstop, no. There was really no room for that. So many of these players had great seasons. Give us your top 10.
Well, I'm going to give you a shocker off the top. Xander Bogaerts as my #1 shortstop in baseball. Okay, Francisco Lindor at #2, Corey Seager 3, Tim Anderson #4, Fernando Tatis Jr. at #5. I expect him to be 1 or 2, next year. But at this point, I have him at #5. Trevor Story at 6, Marcus Semien at 7, Carlos Correa at 8, Bo Bichette breaking into my list at #9. It's a guy who's coming off his age 22 season and is already popping .550 slug. And Trey Turner at #10. I want to talk a little bit about Bogaerts Lindor, though.
Yeah, defend that before we even get into it.
I figured I'd have to start there. Bogaerts has got a 130 WRC plus over the last 3 years. In fact, 138 over the last 2 years. This is a guy who I don't understand why he never gets the love that he deserves as one of the top shortstops in baseball. And I think Lindor regressed back to the pack just a bit this past year that gave me the impetus to have Bogaerts jump over him. I would have had Bogaerts 2 or 3 anyway. But, one of the things that is interesting is if you look at Bogaerts' career, there's some parallels between Bogaerts and Adrian Beltre. If you look at through their age 21 to 27 season, they both have about the same number of plate appearances, a little over 4,000, almost identically the same number of hits. Bogaerts on base is higher, 351 to 326. His OPS is a little higher as well. And his wins or runs created plus are higher, 114 over 107. And again, this was the slower part of Bogaerts' career early on. And their WAR per game played is almost identical. I could see the kind of skills that Bogart has. I could see him playing deep into his 30s, however, playing at third base most likely like Beltre. And I think there's a comp there.
I have historically loved Xander Bogaerts on this list, where I will have him higher than most people expect. And I thought I loved him this year, but clearly I like him. You love him to go up #10. Everyone else going Fernando Tatis. See, like a shortstop at his age, slugging 560 something. Forget it.
Every time you praise Tatis, and when the show airs and people see he's #1, the response is going to be, "How can you say he's #1? He's only played 100 and something games." And that's true. He has not played a full season. But when you look at the skills, right? You know who had the #1 hard hit rate in all of baseball last year? Fernando Tatis. And I also really look at the defensive improvement. Remember, in 2019, he was a really poor defensive shortstop, right? He made the highlight plays, yes, but he was making tons of errors and throwing the ball away. He worked hard on that, and if you look at outs above average, the StatCast metric, he was tied for the best defensive shortstop in baseball this year. Now, small sample defensive metrics are what they are, but that improvement was real. And so you've got a guy who only just turned 22. He's got a career slugging percentage of almost 600. He is the real deal. I don't think it's too soon to say he's #1.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's close to the #1 player in the game overall. Again, to have all those things, but the power, Sarah, blows me away. To be able to do all that and hit for power in that park is saying an awful lot. You have him #1.
Absolutely. I had him #1, and I think Mike and I probably submitted the exact same graphics. I talked about his hard hit rate, and I talked about his defensive improvement. Another hard hit, another way to look at it is hard hit per swing. So it's not just that he's crushing the ball when he makes contact. It's also just more than 20% of his swings resulted in hard contact. That's 95+ mile-an-hour exit velocity. Nobody else did that, and he's doing it at shortstop. And I think that showing everyone that he really can play shortstop, again, in a shortened season, so we'll see what happens. But I think that was a really big thing for the perception of him moving forward, not just as this offensive powerhouse, but also defensively. And we know how good his arm is. So it was never about throwing the ball. It was about getting to the ball or making those plays.
And in any season, Lindor, Seager, Correa could have a year better than Tatis had last year or the year before. But you have him 5th, Vince. That surprised me. Why that low? And Tim Anderson deserves to be somewhere. He's put in real consistent work, but you've got Tatis below him too.
Yeah, I think I could argue with myself about Tatis and Anderson 4 or 5, but I'm not prepared yet, based on the small body of work, to put Tatis Jr. above Seager, Lindor, or Bogaerts. I mean, I think he's every bit their talent, but I want to see it happen just for a little bit longer on the field. If we see him put up a 130+ game season this year, and anything that's remotely close to what he's done this past, in the time he's been in baseball so far, he's definitely in my top 2.
And here's another player we haven't mentioned yet, but you and I, Vince, are in accord here. We have Trevor Story at #6. Trevor Story could be the MVP next year, right? He's a great player. So, Sarah, but you're putting your money where your mouth is. You have Trevor Story up at #2. This is is a great player.
Yeah, I had him number 2. I could have 2 and 3. Honestly, my top 4 with Lindor and then Trey Turner, I could have put in any order and been happy to sit here and talk about. I did put him 2, just slightly over Lindor, just because I really am all in on Trevor Story as a real 5-tool player. I mean, we see the speed, we see the power, and it's not just the Coors Field thing. His underlying stats, everything else tell us that he is hitting the ball really well. His defense has really gotten better, especially over the last 2 years or so, and I think he benefits from playing with Nolan Arenado, so we'll see where he might be after free agency. But I was, it wasn't a definitive 2, but I'm comfortable with it.
I wanted Dansby Swanson. I ran out of space. You found space, Sarah, for Javier Baez, right? Now, I'm writing him off because, yeah, you have to, at a weaker position, Javi Baez. He's Javi Baez. Of course he gets in the top 10. But no, most of these guys are killing it. I have no room.
I mean, it came down to Javi Baez or Gleyber Torres in that 10 spot, and I do think Javi Baez at least is playing the position that seems to best suit him. So that was sort of the conversation I had with myself there in terms of Gleyber's defense compared to Javi Baez. But I mean, there's an argument. I certainly see the argument for keeping him off entirely. His plate discipline has never been there. It's just that this used to work for him. So we'll see if that is again present in 2021.
I thought I was big on Bo Bichette, but we're all big on Bo Bichette, so we're all there at the same time. We don't talk about our lists ahead of time.